This is Kat with Agency Zoom. Welcome to The Rules Still Apply, episode 3. My guest this week, or at least this episode, I guess we don't have to do this for a whole week, huh, Scott?
Sure.
My guest this time around is Scott Leese. He has been a legendary VP of Sales, CRO, every title in the book at this point. I don't think Scott has skipped a single one of them. At InsurTech, he now consults with companies of all different sizes. He has a really cool sales club that does meet every week on Tuesdays, right? It's Tequila Tuesdays.
That's right.
He's just top of the line in everything he does. He's an extremely accessible and down-to-earth person, and I'm really excited to have Scott here. Scott, do you want to share a little bit either about your career or about even what you're doing now with our agencies?
Sure. I've been a head of sales, SVP of sales, whatever you want to call it, 6 times as an operator. I work now running my own consulting firm where I'm a strategic advisor and sales consultant to tech and startup companies all around the world. I also run a business called Surf and Sales, which has a Surf and Sales podcast. I run another business called Thursday Night Sales, which is a weekly sales happy hour that had over 10,000 attendees last year. I also run a Patreon group called Scotty's Little Sales Club that you mentioned. What else do I do? I've written 2 books. In 2017, I wrote a best-selling book called Addicted to the Process. And on January 1st of this year, I just released a book called From Rep to Manager. And I stay very busy, as you know.
Yeah, guys, when first getting here to Agency Zoom and orienting myself, getting into the weeds with you guys, and then needing someone to yank my head out of the weeds and make sure I wasn't forgetting anything. Scott is the person I went to because he's just thoroughly no nonsense. There's not an excuse for anything. There's always a way to get something done. And that's part of even bringing him on here. When we first started coming up with ideas around what we want to talk about, we wanted to talk about getting away from some of the antiquated expectations that sales teams have. And Scott has been in a position that, whether it was fortune or necessity, that he's built sales teams from scratch too. So I think we all kind of shudder sometimes when we think about updating antiquated sales processes. Well, worst case scenario, what if my whole team leaves me? Scott's been, not that your whole team left you, but you've been 0 to 1 with some extremely high performing teams. So help me, because you do know the insurance space extremely well. One of the large InsurTechs that Scott was at was servicing the title insurance space. What do you think one of the antiquated sales processes in insurance is? What are one of the things that insurance forgets about that the rest of the world does well?
That you don't have to be face-to-face. This is the easiest answer in the world. You know, when I first went to Qualia, which sells title insurance software to title companies and real estate attorneys across the country, everybody told me that, because my intention was to have an inside sales team and grow that way. And everybody in the industry was like, good luck with that. Like, this is a good old boy network. You're going to have to go to 400 trade shows a year and buy steaks and whiskeys and shake hands and kiss babies, or it's never going to work. And I just don't hold that belief. You know, all of my experience in SaaS and building sales orgs led me to believe that we could pull this off if we have the right messaging and the right approach. There's absolutely no reason that I need to buy into this old school belief that everything has to be done face to face. So that's the very first place I'd start, you know, and very relevant, obviously, over the last year when so much, if not all, of face-to-face communication has been cut out. But I started doing this in late 2016 with Qualia and selling this particular way, and sure enough, it worked just fine.
I like that too, that you're telling them, one, now it's not just ingenuity that forces you to do it, or the previous experience. You knew you could build an inside sales team successfully. That was something that a lot of agencies right now don't have. They don't have that surety over their process. But now it's sheer necessity. You know, we still aren't able to go face to face. So you guys had an opportunity to compete with Scott back in 2016, when he was doing it on high growth stage. Now you're going to have to do it. Your feet are being held to the fire. Scott, with you coaching so many other businesses, and we think about insurance as a B2C and a B2B play, do you feel like there's industries where an insurance agency could approach them, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, contractors, you name it, other businesses that are receptive to inside sales models, that they could begin to dip their feet in the water and become more comfortable with virtual with other people who are already good at virtual from your own experiences?
Yeah, I mean, my experience tells me that every industry is open to it. It just, you just have to do it enough and do it well enough that people start to get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And once people start to get comfortable, it just kind of spreads like wildfire before, the whole industry is comfortable. Now, if we were to go into the Qualia office or contractor in GC kind of insurance company that I work with, they're not going on to, work sites and that kind of thing. They're holding Zoom calls and conferences, and everybody's receptive, and just has become kind of the new norm. The flip side of that is I still talk to companies who lean on this excuse of, well, when things go back to normal, right? Well, that just seems ridiculous to me. We don't know when things are going back to normal. And if we figure this out and we can be effective and efficient and do things at a faster pace and scale over the phone, I can have 8 meetings a day. Face to face, what do I have? 2, 3, maybe 4, depending on where they are at most. You're coming out ahead. It doesn't mean that you'll never go back face to face. It just means you can save some of the face to face stuff for really key meetings, right? And then you don't have to, maybe we don't all have to travel so much, mm-hmm. right? And it's easier on both parties. And I think just adopting that mindset that, no, this is normal. This is here to stay. I'm not just trying to hang on until things go normal. I need to figure out how to thrive right now. Mm-hmm. And whether it's just embracing inside sales, techniques, or modernizing the kind of tactics you're using by getting into video prospecting or utilizing social more, or whatever it is, you really need to lean all the way into this right now and stop using this crutch of, well, when things go back to normal, I'll be fine.
Right. Do you think there's a step in the process that is different in virtual? When I've gone into, even in an inside sales team, sometimes into markets that are harder to break into, you'll hear about people saying, well, this or that person sets up a discovery call. And that's where you build rapport and you find more pain and you figure out if the person's a good fit for a consultative call. Do you feel like there's a step that needs to be done, or is worth at least looking at and identifying with the team ahead of time if they're going to go from a in-person, very, personalized, very...
No, I think that step would be upfront.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, I think in face-to-face selling, there's a bit of a social expectation that, we're going to kind of shoot the shit and get to know each other a little bit, right? Whereas, over Zoom and digital communication, I think the expectation is more of like, no, Kat, I kind of should already know a little bit about you. Like, I already should know that you're from Ohio and, where you work and, even some of the content that you've posted or what's going on with your company if I'm trying to sell to you, right? And you should know the same about me. So I think the difference is, I think there's a little bit more burden of responsibility to do some research up front versus just kind of being able to wing it once you and I sit down in a restaurant somewhere. And I think part of that is because we can have so many more meetings now and do so many more things because we're not traveling. I think we try to cram more and more things into our day. And when you do that, people's schedule gets packed. And what happens is you want to get to the point a little faster. Mm-hmm. So I think the expectation is there that we kind of need to know a little bit about this person, and that rapport needs to either just like hit right away or already be there, right, versus allowing it to kind of develop over the course of a beer or two.
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a big difference, I think.
Do you think that's a quick trade-off though too, that an agency could make, that when they decide that they're going to go from in person to virtual, and I'm going to go from 2 or 3 meetings a day to 5 or 6 or 8, do you think that's part of the trade-off though, is to come more prepared? It's still an hour of time that this person has earned. It's just that 30 minutes belongs to Scott before I talk to Scott so that I have a good conversation, and 30 minutes is with Scott, one-to-one now on the Zoom.
Yeah, the amount of time is probably different depending on the industry and who you're selling to and how much information is or is not available,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you were going to sell to me, there's a bazillion things of information out there.
Yep.
So it shouldn't take you 30 minutes.
Right.
If you and I are trying to sell to, the CEO of a insurance company or something like that, and maybe they don't have a big LinkedIn presence, maybe they haven't written articles or content of things for me to find, then you might need 30 minutes. But the need to prep, I think, is a little stronger now, in digital selling than it is in face-to-face. How much time? I think it depends on you and kind of who you're selling to.
Sure.
But it is a trade-off. It is a trade-off. But I think one that most people would happily make.
Yeah, I would much rather be researching or creeping on somebody's LinkedIn, with coffee in hand, not made up yet, than out on the road driving from place to place, just constantly on the move. Do you think something else comes along too in establishing who you are? Do you think there's more responsibility to establish like your company and your intent for the meeting? Like, not only should I show up prepared to talk to you and be able to build rapport very quickly and be prepared with who you are, should I make it easier and more recognizable that you understand who I am? Is there some additional due diligence that the prospect is putting on the seller too?
It's a good question. I don't know how much you can put on them and expect them to do. I do think that you should give them the opportunity to do that. So here's a perfect example. Let's say you and I get booked on the calendar together. I think most people still maybe put a note or two about the purpose of the meeting and then the Zoom link and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, why not put a link to your LinkedIn profile so somebody can scan you and figure out who you are? If you're trying to sell to me, why not, include a couple links to the different entities that I'm a part of? And if I'm trying to sell to you, I definitely would say, if you want to learn more about me and how I think about sales, like, here's a link to this book, or here's a link to this article, that kind of stuff. Expecting them to do that kind of homework, I wouldn't have that expectation. Giving them the option to do it, I would. And I think that that's the right kind of protocol and behavior right now in this kind of selling environment. And the more that we have at the click of a button in front of us to quickly remember what the hell we're doing and who we're talking to and why we're here and what's this person all about, the more we have that kind of stuff available to us, I think it helps us maximize our time and be as productive as possible. There's some great tools out there. There's a company called Warmly that I was talking to earlier today that kind of pulls LinkedIn profiles from your calendar, and it has easy reminder of who you're talking to and that kind of things, and pulls Salesforce info, so notes from the CRM shows up in the calendar view, so you don't have to type it and add it, and I think this is going to become more and more commonplace the longer that we're working and selling this way. Tools are going to come around to kind of solve and optimize for this stuff. And now that we're on this topic, like the next thing I would say that companies need to do to get out of this like old school antiquated selling kind of methods is you've got to adopt modern selling technology. And not doing that, you're just massively behind the competition, big time. And so that's something that hopefully people come to embrace, whether it's enablement tech or helping with email writing and cadence building or conversational intelligence tools, whatever it is, you got to start including this stuff in your day to day, and not doing so means you're not going to the battle with a right amount of ammunition.
Right. Right. I was so surprised, and I think it's an area that in insurance, if we are going to go from antiquated to much improved, if we can get like the check plus on our new report card by the middle of this year, that whether it's because COVID forced us to or because we wanted to, that we finally get there. I was so surprised when I was on the board for Columbus Women in Sales. There were 700 women that were in a B2B environment. And of the ones in this group session, we had 75 or so in the group session. 30% of them still had no CRM.
Wow. Yeah.
B2B environment. And I was just so floored. But it tells you that even in B2B, while expectations are changing, show up and be prepared, have information available that I could research you and learn more about you. You be prepared, I'll be prepared. There's still an opportunity, like you said, with sales technology, email writing, you name it, marketing, anything of the sort, to stand out of the crowd. You don't have to feel like you're so far behind that there's no making up the lost ground. You could be an all-star in your own space still if you did it right. Yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to encourage people a little bit more to think of too.
Look, and in this particular industry, adopting some of these methods and technologies, it's still going to put you in the early adopter category, probably, as opposed to being, super late to the party and well behind. There's some companies that are maybe out in front, but like not, you could jump into the race and be super competitive and even ahead of plenty of people right now if you took advantage of some of this stuff. And it's not that complicated, and it's worth the investment. It pays off in spades.
I heard a really great quote last week when I was working with one of our agencies, who's actually our agency of the month, but heard a great quote. He said, everyone has to keep in mind that their customers, like the current people that you rely on to pay the bills, are someone else's prospects. And even that, like, we're in a pretty good place as a company here, but even that just made me itch a little. Like, I'm such a competitive person, that made me itch a little. And I think that's something that in our space where we are a little behind on tech, and even our practices, once we have tech, linger on, the like 90s side of things, even like sales processes, all of it, you name it, are a little, we're going to keep using antiquated and I'm going to get crucified for it later. But they are. When we think of it that way, that's very scary. Retention is what so many of these agencies are living off of. It's how they keep the lights on. It's how they pay their employees. And the fact that we're ready to like rest on our laurels. When he said that, your customers are somebody else's prospects, that was a moment.
Well, I think that's a good lesson to learn for people who are running companies and in charge of product. You have to be continuously innovating and trying to give more and more value to your current customers, which in turn hopefully brings you new ones, but it will keep the ones that are there around. Nobody's going to keep using something that doesn't work,
right,
and doesn't bring them some kind of ROI, whether it's financial or just time or whatever they're saving. So, and that is the same thing with sales orgs. Like, let's say that I'm a seller in a sales org that does not have a CRM, for example. Why would I keep selling there? Why would I not pick up and leave and go to a sales org that not only has a CRM, but has 3 or 4 other tools that make my life easier, right? So this war for retention and war for customers can also become a war for talent. And you will lose that talent war if you're not already losing it, especially people who've had a taste of using some of these tools.
Yep.
Like, all the tools that I've used, if I ever went back and started another sales org, do you think I'm going to not have a CRM? Are you kidding? Like, absolutely blows my mind.
Yeah.
You know, once people get a taste of it, they're not going to go back. And so you're running that risk every single day by not giving your team what they need in order to be successful, and by not making it easier on your prospects and your customers as well.
We've certainly in the insurance space, and you guys have seen it in title insurance too. There's been an exodus of talent, or probably not even an exodus. Like it wasn't here. It just talent kept aging. And we had really strong producers that are now starting to get a taste of like what could be better. Like, oh, virtually, I'm more efficient and I get to stay home. My CRM does a lot of my work for me. That's nice. So we're seeing on the upper end of agencies where there's very talented sellers that aren't the agency owner, that they're leaving. But we don't have a younger talent pool. Do you think, because you've been in that position that you have your talent pool, you know, people will come to work for you wherever you set up shop. Do you think that there's non-negotiables if somebody's looking to attract a, let's even call it a 27 to a 30-year-old, or 32, 34, something in that range. You're looking for somebody that's young enough in their career that they're moldable, but you're also still not taking somebody maybe right out of college that's truly young or right out of high school. Do you think there's non-negotiables that as an industry insurance is forgetting?
I don't know if they're forgetting so much as just not putting enough emphasis on it and thinking that they'll be okay. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and we've been talking about some of them. I don't think a 25-year-old with a couple years sales experience wants to go to 200 trade shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. That's not how they want to spend their time. I don't think they want to drive around and knock on doors and do face-to-face prospecting when everybody else of their age is able to use sales tools that allow them to make, 50 to 500 sales calls every single day. I don't think they're going to want to work for a place that isn't interested in developing them as a person and being invested in their career and their skills and guiding them towards, leadership roles. And so not having a kind of teacher and just an education kind of component to your sales org and developing people, I don't think that's gonna last. I think those people are gonna be, in big trouble who try to run those sales organizations. And it's difficult for me a little bit maybe to get out of the silo and the bubble that I'm in. But I don't know anybody who's 27 years old who wants to go work for a company that doesn't have tooling, that doesn't develop people, that's going to force you to be on the road all the time, right? Nobody that I talk to wants to work in those kind of environments. People have no problem trying to sell to industries that are behind the times.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of the biggest areas of opportunity in technology today is vertical specific SaaS, meaning you find an industry that is still using on-prem software, for example, like the title insurance industry was in 2016 and 17, and saying, hey, the rest of the world is in the cloud. What are you doing?
Yep.
Right? And you find these kind of industries all over the place with general contractors, commercial real estate, and insurance. I'm aware of some in like fund industries like golf course management software, legitimately like medical software. I don't know if the last time anybody went to the doctor, but have you ever seen the platform people are using to punch in your data? It looks like the Oregon Trail from like 1985. It's absolutely ridiculous. So there's so much opportunity to go into these old school industries that have been doing things a particular way and rip and replace the technology, and younger salespeople get a kick out of that. That's fun. That's fun to go in and present to somebody who's been in the industry for a long time and say, look, you're a market leader. You want to stay a market leader, you got to evolve, right? And the prospect will be like, we've been doing business this way for 25 years, right? No, you haven't. Because 25 years ago, you didn't have a laptop. 25 years ago, you didn't have an iPhone, let alone a cell phone, right? So businesses evolve all the time. We just have to reframe the conversation and get them to recognize that they're actually more kind of open to change than they might think. their initial reaction is to shut down, and this is going to be hard. But really, they've been evolving these businesses for a long time, and this is just the next step.
Right. I like the idea of reframing it. How do you think, because you've gone through this and you've had to coach even other businesses on it too, how do you think you reframe it for a multi-generational team? When you sit down, you have to coach myself, somebody in their late 40s, and then somebody that's, managing your 7 largest clients, but is 62 years old. How do you reframe it in a way that you can get that buy-in as a manager from multi-generational? Because if we do step up our industry and we start getting some younger people, and then there's just this clash between our boomers, and then I think it's Gen Z now, right, that are coming out of college. They're not even millennials anymore. It's Gen Z
Yeah.
coming out of college. How do you find that balance, especially as you're striking the change as a manager yourself?
I mean, I find that all people care about is how well they do and how much they're going to get paid. It's
That's
that
true
simple.
then, right?
Yeah. So I don't care if I'm talking to a 65-year-old, a 45-year-old, or a 25-year-old. All they care about is this going to help me do my job better?
Mhm.
Is this going to make me more successful? And if so, help me learn it as simply and quickly as humanly possible. And that's it. So it's not about showing up and saying, hey, we have to do this. It's about showing up and explaining why this makes sense and why the way we've been doing things is no longer the most optimal way to do it. And if we do these changes, this is what you're going to get out of it. This is what the end result will be. And being able to communicate and articulate that and then demonstrate it,
Mhm.
you get buy-in.
Right.
And if you're in one of those brackets of folks who's been in the industry for a really long time and is thinking, you don't want to learn something new, unfortunately, you're going to get pushed out. You're going to get pushed out. You have to find ways to stay relevant and stay, up to speed, if you will. It's almost like continuing education credit. You can know everything that there is to know about the industry, but if you don't know how to sell and you don't know how to video prospect and you don't know how to use social to your advantage to research people and you don't know how to listen to recorded call, like, you're going to be a relic. It's that simple.
Right.
And I think nobody wants to be a relic. Nobody wants to get pushed out into, early retirement or have to find, a different job. They're willing to do the work and learn so long as they understand this is going to take me from making, 10 sales a month to 15. Or instead of this taking me 20 hours a week to do, it's now going to take me 2. As long as what we're bringing to the table helps our team perform, my experience is that they're all about it and they'll support it.
I think that's a good way to approach it too. Not that like what we're doing now is this new, incredibly novel thing. Like, no, what we're truly doing right now is the same. We're doing the most with our time as successfully as possible. And there's just a new process to get that done. And then also not casting a bad light on the previous decisions. Because, in a scenario where there's agency owners and 10 years ago, they made a decision to do something different, we certainly don't want to diminish previous decisions that they were wrong. So it's not that here's the new way, it's better, we're doing things the wrong way now. It's no, here's the new way. It's the same things, just doing it in a different daily format. And then the old way, not bad, just something we have to migrate away from. And here's how we're going to migrate. I like how you took a very teaching approach of this is the different daily life and here's the full upside of it as well.
Yeah, making sure people understand the why behind the decision is unfortunately often overlooked and not explained enough. So I would encourage everybody to, spend some time there.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps most things up for us today, Scott. I appreciate you joining us. Is there anything else like the terrifying quote that I had shared that you would want to share with those small to mid-sized business owners that are, still trying to stay relevant or, like you said, migrate their teams into a more successful future?
the thing that I would leave people with is, one thing that prevents people from switching platforms or using a different service is the degree of difficulty of the migration itself or the onboarding experience. And I think people remember the last time they made a switch, which was 10, 15, 20 years ago in some cases. And it was painful. So I think that their memory is linked to that prior experience. But what's happened now is companies and products and services have become so good at onboarding and so good at building technology that is really intuitive and simple to use. I think people need to recognize that, the degree of difficulty in picking up these new technologies has shrunk.
Right.
And it's a lot less complicated than you might think it is. And you're going to get a lot more support than you did the last time you switched. Therefore, you don't need to be as scared, and you should be open to exploring and checking these things out.
Do you think there's more to the fact that many companies have a culture that is around that too, that the accessibility, not only that product has improved, but that the whole philosophy around onboarding and making their culture, like they're willing to teach you, they're willing to get in the weeds with you. Do you think there's something to be said for that portion too?
I do. I mean, I definitely think we're in a kind of customer first era and mindset. I don't think we're in the Wall Street era of the 1980s in terms of sellers. I think a lot of sellers would recoil big time from the thought that they're coin operated. A lot of people are in sales because they like solving problems and they like helping people now. And those types of statements would have sounded ridiculous 30 years ago to somebody in sales. But a buyer has never had more information and exposure to a product ahead of time before talking to you. So putting them first has become more and more important. And part of putting them first is we need to make this thing easy to use, super intuitive, not complicated, not expensive to onboard, right? And so if I swap out a system to bring in a new one, it's not going to take me 6 months and my team 6 months to learn how to use it. It might take 6 days at most, right? And I would hope people stay open to that idea.
Yep. We need to change. We need to explain to our team why we're going to change and help them through it. And then we need to accept too that change isn't as scary as it once was.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're going to keep doing this every month or so, and it'll be hosted here on Agency Nation. Looking forward to seeing you guys again soon.